a funny incident. Well, not funny, I wouldn't say, because it was actually kind of scary at the time. But now it's kind of funny in a morbid way. But anyway, like speaking of rabbits, you know how there's like the Easter Bunny? Well, I remember when I was younger that I did go Easter egg hunting, but I stopped doing that when I was, I guess, in middle school or even high school. Although this particular incident happened during Easter week, or at least before Easter like officially happened on Good Friday, but nonetheless, it was a pretty unique, if strange, kind of like Easter week. Though on the plus side, we got to have an extended day, like because of it. Though why, I'll tell you, like I'll get back to it later. But anyway, on the first day of the Easter week, or the week before Easter, at least, which was Monday to be specific, I remember being in my class as it was during high school. I think it was around grade 10 around that time, and it was in my second period of class where it was an animation class actually that I took, which was pretty unique in itself. However, during that class, we got a strange call from the intercom telling us to stay in our classrooms as it was a lockdown of some kind, right? And at that time it was just like a usual drill or something. However, later, like it got changed to a sort of fire alarm, like emergency exit at the last minute, which was even weirder because we never really did that before. So we ended up exiting the school as told by our teachers. However, that wasn't when things like got weird, but it was what happened next that things kind of grew worrying and kind of scary, at least for some of the students. And not to mention, it was really cold outside. We couldn't really stay outside for too long. So, after waiting a couple minutes, along with asking the teachers and other students what was going on, to which they weren't able to provide any answers, the principal told us to stay in another school that happened to be nearby, which was this elementary, or I think middle school. Alright, that was just a few minutes away from our school building, and we ended up staying in there, or at least staying in the gym to ensure our safety. And we ended up huddling together there, which was probably for the best, given how it was warm, and I guess more people could be able to provide others with body heat. But anyway, in this case, we ended up having to stay there for a couple of minutes, and when I asked again what was going on, apparently rumors started spreading that there was some kind of, like, someone was threatening the school, or at least our school, with something. We didn't know what. And eventually we ended up having to move to the recreation center, because our school was one of the few that had its own recreation center with gyms and even a pool that I would go to during my free time, and I had to take it for physical education. But we ended up going to the recreation center, and that was when we got the full details, where it turns out somebody apparently phoned the school claiming that there was a bomb hidden somewhere, right? And the school obviously didn't want to take any chances, especially since this was after, well, not like right after, but it was like many years after like those unfortunate like school shootings began happening, mostly in the US, though I live in Canada, but it's who's to say that it wouldn't have happened there. So of course, like, our school, or at least the school faculty, wouldn't take any chances and immediately had us like evacuate for our own safety, obviously, right? And we saw that there were police and even police dogs sent to investigate the school premises, right? And I guess this kind of, well, I mean, we didn't like panic or freak out or anything, but I did see some students like start to have panic attacks, with this one girl like who started like crying. It didn't help that it was getting cramped, and some of the students were prone to being claustrophobic. So, though for me, it was just getting kind of uncomfortably, I guess, like tight in there, given that there was very limited space in that particular area. But nonetheless, it like we were able to stay safe, though it was still pretty weird. Like, eventually, I was able to like call my parents to pick me up early, as at this point none of us could go back to class without potentially putting ourselves in danger. And unfortunately, because I accidentally left my phone in my classroom, or at least in my school bag, as we couldn't really bring too much stuff with us outside. So of course, I had to borrow, I think, one of the teachers' cell phones, and it seemed like I wasn't the only one, as I saw other students having to call their parents, possibly borrowed cell phones as well, which is funny considering how nowadays, you can't see people without their cell phones, or at least without looking at it for a couple of seconds. But eventually, my parents, when they caught wind of the situation, they immediately showed up and told, or at least got me from the recreation center. And other than that, everything was just pretty normal. Well, I mean, except for the fact that I had to leave my stuff at the school to pick up next day. Though on the plus side, I got a new cell phone after that particular incident, so it wasn't too bad. And well, eventually we managed to get our stuff the next day, but because as we found out later, the whole thing was just a huge prank that some idiot thought was a good idea, which inevitably made the news. So it wasn't that minor, but it wasn't that major, but still it was pretty bad. Well, anyways, we ended up eventually getting our stuff back, though because the schedules got scrambled up as a result, we had no choice but to go to different classes from our usual schedule. But other than that, everything was pretty fine, though I assume some of the students were still talking about the whole kind of how do I it wasn't a catastrophe, but the whole, I guess, kerfuffle, or hullabaloo, right? But other than that, everything was pretty normal. However, Wednesday, which was the day after Tuesday, everything was fine and everything seemed to be back to normal. But on Thursday, another really weird thing happened where we ended up going to class like usual, though I think I was in my first period class. I mean, seriously, not just not a full day, and we get something even crazier happen. And you know how we mentioned it was cold and we got an extra day off earlier? Well, in this case, everything kind of came full circle, or at least it's sort of, I guess in a way, it was foreshadowing what was supposed to happen, where I was in my English class and we were just in the middle of our lecture when all of a sudden the power went out, and I think there was a distant crash somewhere outside the school, and the students and even the teachers were really alarmed as to what was going on. And eventually we were told, I think not through the intercom, but through other teachers or students outside of our classroom, that one of the electric telephone poles ended up crashing right in front of the school. As it turns out, there was freezing rain that occurred the night before, which unfortunately the school didn't take an account of, especially since whenever freezing days happened, or freezing rain happened, we had to stay home for our safety. But apparently the school didn't think it was, well, at the time they didn't seem to think that it was that much of a big deal until the consequences finally happened with a blackout occurring. And as a result, while the school itself didn't have electricity, but we still had a signal on our phones, and as a result I had to once again tell my parents that I would be coming home. Though this time I think I took the bus home, because I was able to take a bus without any problems, as I'm very good at checking the bus stop, or most of the time. Though the reason why I couldn't do it on Monday was because I accidentally left my wallet along with my other belongings at the school. So of course I couldn't take the bus without some necessary items. But other than that, everything was fine. Though there was this kind of funny, some embarrassment where I called my mom, but because my phone, or at least my new phone, had a bit of a no, I think it was my old phone, where it had a bit of an issue when it came to calling people, and I had to often use speaker. And my mom, she told me not to use too much screen time, because back then, I guess I was a bit too glued to my like phone or computer or even the TV. Like I heard some students kind of giggling in the background. Yeah, but other than that, it was a pretty like funny if kind of weird day. But then again, this wouldn't be the last time I had to experience weird moments in my life. So another weird incident that happened, like it was still in our old home, though it was like a couple months after, or maybe a couple years after or after I graduated from high school. Like where it happened during the night, which like would sound scary, but like in this case, like it wasn't anything too like deadly, but it was still pretty like freaky because of how unexpected it was. Where we we were in our homes and I was just using the TV in our living room. Though now we kind of moved it downstairs in our new home. But anyway, like we were just like relaxing in our like rooms as my parents were downstairs as their bedroom is in the basement where so I was just in the living room like as I mentioned before using my TV with my dog like sleeping next to me and my sister she was sleeping in her room like completely unaware what was going to happen and a few minutes while I was watching my TV like we heard a strange boom like from the distance and I thought it wasn't anything special as it was kind of rainy outside, though it was light rain at least. And as a result, like, we didn't think it was anything bad. But my dog, she immediately started barking. But then, well, at first, like, I didn't think it was anything serious because she was barking, as she tends to bark at even the most random things, like, or even bark at nothing at all. However, when I went downstairs to ask my parents if they heard that, they also told me that they heard it too. And at first, like, we thought it was just, like, say, something fell over in the backyard. But then, when we went to check outside, we saw that it turns out the whole neighborhood heard the booming sound. Well, maybe not the whole neighborhood, but at least the neighborhood that we lived in, and along with the people close to us, either right beside or even right across from us, they too heard the strange booming noise, and even they had no idea what was going on, as we saw many of them, like, come out of their houses with like worry on their faces. And it wasn't until later that we found out that a house blew up just a couple blocks down, and it got apparently it was due to a gas leak of some kind. Right, as the house was apparently like gone at this point, and right, as a result, though thankfully nobody got hurt, though a few houses beside it, unfortunate or close to it, unfortunately got hit with some of the debris, and as a result, like the original owners of the house had to move. And even scarier was that, like when I told my sister what was going on, she immediately like called one of her friends who happened to live in the neighborhood that was apparently closer to the house. Though thankfully he didn't get affected. Though he apparently sent a picture of what happened, and it quickly made the news throughout the night and to the next day. And the next day when I think I was walking my dog because I tended to do that a lot, like at least in an old neighborhood, where I went around some of the houses, or at least to the people who were outside and asked, or at least living in their homes, and asked if they heard the booming sound too. And some said yes, while others they were a bit too far away to hear it, and with some not even being there that night, though there were some rumors going around that the people in the who lived in the house that blew up purposefully destroyed it so they could get insurance, which I mean could be plausible given how some people have pulled that kind of stunt in the past, regardless of the consequences. Though we don't know for sure, as the people just moved out. Though a couple days later, I went to visit the neighborhood that had the house blown up, and some of the neighbors outside were like kind enough to show me where it was, and there were some kids like kind of surrounded with one kid claiming that he saw the house blow up right in front of his eyes. Though he didn't get hurt obviously, but it was still pretty crazy, especially given how we could hear it just a couple of, I guess, meters away. I don't know how long the distance was, but it was definitely a lot shorter than it usually is. So, yeah, kind of scary as to what could have been had the house been even just a few meters closer to ours, or at least to our neighbors. Canada's Wonderland. I mean, Canada's Wonderland is the biggest kind of, I guess, amusement or theme park that anyone would go to. I mean, I should know. Like, me and my family, along with some friends of ours, have gone there multiple times. Probably like more than 5 times at least. Though I haven't gone there in a while because I guess I kind of stopped being interested in it. But funny thing is, I would go there a lot on field trips, like whether it be for my old church or even school field trips as well. Yeah, but in this case, I went there because, well, our high school, like back then, had an orchestra, and we were actually supposed to perform there, and it was a pretty good experience. After that, we obviously went on some rides, because who wouldn't go to Canada's Wonderland or to any theme park without taking a ride or two, right? Anyway, while we were there, something weird happened again, but like it was kind of funny at the same time given what happened after. So anyway, like after we rode on some ride, you know how there was that ride like called the Sky Drop, I believe? Or no, it was actually called the White Water. Oh no, not that. It was well, it was definitely oh no, it was called the Windseeker, where it was that reddish one with the ride that was sort of like move diagonal or bend diagonally while spinning people around in their seats. So anyway, I went on that ride, and there were some teachers who kind of helped like keep me occupied because there were several music or even like some non-music teachers who accompanied us for the trip and were supposed to help guide us while also supervising us because obviously we were still minors or students in this case. But anyway, I went on the Windseeker because I thought it was interesting. So the moment I got on, like things started getting, well, as I mentioned before, really weird as well. Everything seemed normal at first as we just went up, and it was amazing how high we were up. However, while we were still at the very top, the ride suddenly stopped spinning, and I was stuck in the seat with this other girl next to me who was older, and I think she had a sort of punk or kind of goth look. I don't know. Like, she had, I think, dyed hair and wore kind of black or dark clothing. But anyway, in this case, we ended up getting stuck there because it turns out there was a weird malfunction, right? At least according to the announcer down below. But they assured us that the ride would resume shortly and they would bring us down. But the girl next to me started freaking out. We're saying, "Are you kidding me right now?" Yeah, and like, though personally, I was surprisingly not freaked out, as I was just, well, maybe on the inside I was kind of panicking at the time. I was trying not to, I guess, like fan the flames. But in this case, I was just trying to stay calm in my seat and didn't really say much. It was just kind of awkward because I barely knew the other girl. But other than that, or at least me, we along with the other like guests ended up staying up at the top for a couple of minutes. Thankfully, we were brought down gently as possible. And when the teachers asked if I was okay, I told them about like how weird it was, and then they jokingly asked if it was my fault that the ride suddenly stopped, as it apparently didn't do that for the other guests. Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny. Yeah, I just went along with it. Yeah, though this wouldn't be the last time I was kind of blamed for a really weird incident, but it was still kind of funny at the same time. So, as I mentioned before, I used to be in the Navy, and while there were some ups and downs, especially with the downs, unfortunately causing me to quit the Navy and resign because I couldn't handle the pressure anymore. But I remember this one, like, funny incident that I guess makes me kind of nostalgic for, like, the good times that happened there. Yeah, though it was still pretty weird, as with my other kind of weird stories. Yeah, but in this case, like, for my Navy training, I had to go to the base for Tuesdays and Thursdays, though that was only around evenings. Whereas Saturdays was a full day training that started from around 6 a.m. that ended to 2 p.m. at the latest, right? Or even earliest, depending on the time. But in this case, we definitely ended a couple, or at least 2 hours earlier because of what happened later in the day. Like, as that day, we were just going through the various, like, training modules and lectures. And I recall me and some other recruits, or even, I guess, veteran sailors, we were having this lecture in one of the windowless rooms where there was a PowerPoint slide that showed us the phonetic alphabet along with radio signals, because obviously, like, we were sailors and we had to learn that stuff to keep in contact with the ship's office. However, like, during the lesson, I didn't sleep or anything because, like, that would be rude and I'd probably get in serious trouble. But in this case, I kind of have a habit of drifting off into, like, imagination, or, well, not because I was bored or anything, but there were times where I sometimes tend to, like, I guess, like, how do I put it? I guess wander in my head, or sometimes, like, accidentally, like, not doze off, but sometimes you know how there are those moments where you can't help but accidentally daydream a lot, or, like, kind of, like, imagine things differently? Well, in this case it happened to me, but the funny thing is, the one thing that for some reason kept popping to my head was, what if the base that I was in had a blackout, like, right here, right now? And, like, guess what happens a few seconds later? Like, immediately after that, or maybe a couple seconds after that, like, our base literally had a blackout. Like, it was really crazy and also kind of freaky. Though, like, thankfully nobody panicked, but people were just wondering what the heck happened. And I was, like, completely shocked because I did not expect for it, nor did I intend to do it as if that actually was me, but it was still pretty funny as to how, like, it happened, like, while I was thinking about it. Yeah, and later we had to leave the classroom and go downstairs to the mess hall, which is where, like, we usually relax or even eat meals, like, during occasions. But in this case, we had to go there along with the other, like, sailors and officers, because, like, where else were we supposed to go? And anyway, we ended up staying there, like, until the blackout stopped, which was, I think, like, an hour later. Though our commanding officer at the time did say that if the blackout continued for, like, a couple more hours, then we were allowed to leave. And I guess, like, a lot of us were kind of hoping we would, because we were all getting really tired. Though for me, I was so shocked by the fact that a blackout still occurred, and I actually told some other sailors that about what I was thinking about, and they jokingly claimed that I was the one who somehow caused the blackout with my psychic powers or something. Yeah, which would be kind of funny if that did happen. Yeah, but then again, it was really cold and windy outside because obviously it was winter back then. It was I think it was before the Christmas season, I believe. Yeah, so that probably was the main reason as to why the blackout did occur, but it was still pretty funny to think about it, right? However, the blackout didn't last long, as it ended up turning, or at least the power turned back on. However, the commanding officer decided to kind of, I guess, cut us some slack by saying we could go home early, but only if someone told him a decent pirate joke that made him and everyone else laugh. And someone actually managed to do that, where it was this, I forgot his name, but it was this one guy who had his arm in a cast, though he hid it in his jacket to the point where I genuinely thought he had one arm until I looked closer, right? Though his friends explained that he got into some kind of accident on the street involving a truck that somehow, like, accidentally caught his arm and apparently dragged him across the road to the point where it broke. I don't know, it was kind of gruesome. Yeah, but anyway, the guy with the broken arm ended up telling the commanding officer a decent pirate joke, and it made him laugh. Though, unfortunately, I couldn't remember details because I was too far in the back to, like be able to listen. But overall, like we were able to go home early, and it was so funny how like the blackout was still fresh on our minds, and it was probably the one thing that made us go home along with the pirate joke. Yeah, though on the plus side, like after that, me and some of my platoon members who were also my classmates and along with being fellow recruits, we ended up like going to this like Williams like next door, like because it happened to be very close to our base, and overall we had a pretty nice dinner. And after that, it was yeah, that was basically it. And I ended up having to take a lift back home, but overall, while it was pretty weird, it was also a pretty good day. Yeah, so that's all I can say. And it was probably one of the few good memories I have. So, funny thing is, I texted my neighbor, or I told my neighbor this story. Yeah, and given that he used to be in the Navy as well, it was pretty, he found it hilarious and jokingly called me Neo from the Matrix. Yeah, just pretty hilarious to think about. This should be the last weird story, unless I like can think of other things. Because, like I mentioned before, my memory's a bit fuzzy times. But this actually happened a lot more recently than you think. Though it happened around October, or at least the middle of October. Where, you see, we moved to our new home like around June. Though thankfully I had finished my classes before then, so we didn't have to worry about me missing anything important. But anyway, it happened around October. Our parents were away, leaving only me, my sister, and of course my dog, like at home because like they were in Alberta visiting some old friends of theirs. However, like not even like a few days after they leave, but rather the day that they leave, like something really like crazy happened. Well, maybe not too crazy, but it was still pretty crazy at the time. Where my sister, she was trying to take a shower, but unfortunately, because our house was, well, I wouldn't say it was too old, but it was still pretty old by usual standards. The faucet that was supposed to help turn the water off and on immediately broke off. At least that's what my sister told me. And as a result, the bathtub wouldn't stop flowing with water. Yeah, though thankfully, like it didn't overflow to the point of flooding. But as the drain was still open, but it was still pretty freaky, and we were both kind of arguing over like what we should do. And as a result, we had no choice but to text our parents and tell them like what was, or at least call them over what was going on. And they told us to call some of our neighbors. But while there were some who unfortunately weren't available, thankfully one of our next door neighbors was available, as he had some, I don't know if he had experience with plumbing, but he was definitely of great help when it came to trying to find when it came to fixing our like plumbing issues. Though he told us that we had to turn off the water supply downstairs, and thus we couldn't shower or bathe or even use the sink for a while. So we had to like stay in our rooms like for like, or at least stay upstairs for most of the day, like until he could find a way to fix it. As it turns out, the faucets were really old, and unfortunately, that day just happened to be the day that they finally broke, which was really inconvenient for us. But thankfully, our neighbor, along with the people that actually used to live in our old home, or rather, one of them, they were able to get another plumber to help fix the issue, or at least fix the shower system. And we were like, though me and my sister had to stay in our rooms while also trying to calm down the dog who wouldn't stop barking and freaking out over new people showing up. And though other than that, it was pretty kind of regular, though it was really cold and rainy outside, so we had to be, and not to mention windy, so we had to be very careful. No, I don't think it was rain, but it was definitely snowy as well. Yeah, though, because my sister like felt really sorry for the guy, but also wanted to thank him. She brought him, or rather, she bought like she went all the way to the nearby store to get a cake for him, which she was touched by. Yeah, though unfortunately we didn't realize that he personally didn't really like desserts, but he did promise to give it to his mother and maybe eat it with her. Yeah, but or at least with his family. So overall, like we were able to at least have a good time with him. Yeah, thankfully, after a long, hard day, he, along with the other guys, they were able to finally fix the plumbing issue. Though I think he was, though he it seemed like he was one who did most of the work. But nonetheless, we were able to finally turn the water supply back on while also being able to, like, I don't know, use the showers. Though me and my sister decided to use the downstairs shower, like, for the time being, as we did not want to repeat of what was going to happen. Even so, well, it was pretty annoying, inconvenient that the shower upstairs just had to break. But nonetheless, we were able to mostly keep calm and stay rational were as we finally got it fixed, and I'll forever be thankful for our neighbor who was generous enough to help us. Yeah, and I told or some people about it, and they were like shocked, but they were also like happy to see that everything turned out okay, at least like in the end. Right, so right, and our parents, they wanted to thank our neighbor in some way and even invite him over to our house for a special dinner, though we have yet to do it, but hopefully we will, because I want to see if there's any other way we could thank him once and for all. Whereas before, I didn't really get a chance to get to know him that well, but maybe in this case, like, we'll at least be closer with him.